Good evening and welcome to Sahara TV. We are right here at the Powerhouse venue in Brooklyn, Dumbo actually. And this is NoViolet Bulawayo, who's actually launching her book, We Need New Names.
I'm actually coming from Boston. I was at the Nantucket Book Festival this weekend. And before that I was in Seattle. Before that I was in Portland. And a couple of weeks before that I was in the UK at the Hayfest and in London. So it's been a nice, nice tour, and I'm just loving talking to people about the book and hearing those who have read the book. It's a lucky book. It's getting so much love, and I'm very humbled.
There is a brief silence, like maybe the girl is considering what she has written, and then she says, "Oh, you mean angel?" "Yes, angel. That's what I was trying to tell you all this time. I want the red one," and Fostalina says, rolling her arm. The sound of it like something is vibrating inside her mouth, and I promise myself I'll never sound like that. When Aunt Fostalina gets off the phone with the Victoria's Secret lady, she dials a number that must be busy because she quickly hangs up.
We need new names. The first thing that somebody would think, okay, whose names are we talking about?
That title comes from a specific scene, but beyond that, of course, I was trying to speak to the need for new identities, new ways of looking at ourselves, new ways of imagining the world around us. I mean, the book was written at a very critical time in Zimbabwe's history, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who felt like we really needed new things. So things being open, being an open-ended sort of reference to whatever, whether you're talking of leadership or ways of living.
You talk about this particular girl, Darling, who's 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Darling leaves Africa to come overseas at 10 years old. You left Africa at 18 to come. Yeah. Could that Darling be yourself?
Yes and no. I mean, Darling is growing up in a very different Zimbabwe from the Zim I know. I'm part of the generation known as the Born Frees. We were born right after independence. We were children of promise and life was golden. Darling, on the other hand, is growing up when things are falling apart. So to that end, we are two very different people. But of course, coming to the US, for me and her, we have similarities. We are both immigrants. We are both living at the margins. So, for that part, she kind of borrowed from my own experience.
Okay, when you pick your characters, I see that you pick specific names. How do you get to that point? Because I know it's very exciting reading.
I come from a culture where our parents pick names that speak. Your own name, Fungai, if we translate it in English, somebody would be like, wow. Such a name, but in our own languages, it's perfectly ordinary. So I looked at We Need New Names as it's many things, but at the same time, it's also a celebration of my own heritage of where I come from. So I wanted to bring that specific flavor to the book, so that people get a feel of the kind of names that our parents give us. But of course, there are some names like Bastard. That's a name that your friends give you, a nickname on the playground.
I had a question about the sort of group body of work called African Literature. This year there's been a bunch of books coming out. Your book, Chimamanda had Americana come out, Haile Selassie, Ghana's Go, and then there's a book, Happiness Like Water. So there seems to be a moment of sort of young African origin women writing these terrific books that have just happened to come out within the last 12 months. Haile Selassie has been on record as saying quite strongly that she doesn't believe that there's such a thing as African literature, and she thinks it's a way of sort of ghettoizing a whole genre of different, a whole collection of different work by different people with different voices. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that. Is that a tradition you're now part of being part of? Or this is something you also think sort of puts your book in this special section in the bookstore?
I think that's a very relevant topic that we are kind of grappling with as young African writers writing today. But I think it also has a lot to do with the individual. And for me, the African writer is a matter of identity. I am an African, it's true. And if you look at my work, it's set in Africa. My characters are African, and my issues kind of come from a specific space.
Okay, now I was talking to your editor, and we talked about the question that she asked you, if you think in English.
You know, it's an issue of language and how you are connected to it. I have friends who are very comfortable in the English language and they speak in English and it's all fine. But for me, as somebody who grew up in a culture of orature, who's so attuned, I mean, my ear is so attuned to the spoken word. And when I'm working, I'm always, for me, it's the number one stop. When I'm trying to say something, it doesn't always work in situations when I'm expected to respond, and I have to filter, you know. Right. But when I'm creating, it's a very conscious decision. English for me is a very bland, very boring, very lifeless language. Right. Whereas mine is so much alive. It has rhythm, you know. I feel like I say what I want to say in my language. So it's an issue of marrying both my language and the English language. And again, going back to the question of celebrating your heritage.